Good afternoon, Niner faithful, and welcome to another episode of the Hammerhead Show. It is Friday, 4 p.m., beautiful Friday afternoon. Jack and I are here. I'm Rob Schuh, your host. As always, that's my co-host, Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat. Jack, how's your Friday going?
It's going good. It's Friday, and this is really the kickoff of the weekend for me. Is always to come on and talk 49er football with you in the afternoon. It always sets up the rest of the weekend for me. So looking forward to it.
Nice. And you just wrapped up a stream that you were doing with Wayne Breezy over on your channel. Is that correct? How did that go?
It went well. It was a lot of fun. It's the first time I'd had a chance to talk with him. I've been, really trying to get out and talk to broaden the group of people I'm talking 49ers with. I know I do the call-in shows, and so I get some calls there and ability, and just to get out and talk to the different content creators and folks that are 49ers fans and everything has really been kind of my goal over the last month and a half or so. And so just to do that, it's been a lot of fun. And today's show with Wayne was a blast.
That's great. I also am doing the same thing, trying to reach out to other content creators. I had actually connected with Wayne this week, so we're going to shoot for something in the coming weeks. That is exciting stuff. It's always great to collaborate with fellow creators in the space. You get a new take on things, you get a new angle, and you get a new energy, right? There's just something exciting about bringing in a fresh face and having that new conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a lot of fun. And today you gave me a really good tip on a show that I should be doing on my own. Not even a show, but just a little segment that I should do on a daily basis. So definitely going to take him up on that and start putting that into my my YouTube channel.
Nice. I like the additions. I mean, one of our topics came from the world according to Jack, which was a new addition that you're doing on Monday on mornings over on Twitter. And I think it's fantastic. I am loving those little tidbits as they come out day by day.
Yeah, it's some days it's old throwback stuff. Like, the first one was definitely a throwback one. I had the one from my mom and different things, and today was definitely a Talanoa Hufanga day, and that one seems to have wrinkled in a group of folks and gotten another group of folks really excited.
Yes, and we are going to talk about that topic coming up, no doubt about it. We have the folks in the chat here already. We've got Stivers209 coming in. 49ers assign Deebo to cut Jimmy Garoppolo, pay him $15,000 and move on. That seems low. 15 grand seems a little low, but I'm sure he's looking at a larger figure than that. Charles Thurman, a sneakerhead here on the channel. Pump for the show. Have you heard anything about the Panthers wanting to trade for Subway Jimmy? No, the latest Jimmy news I saw was the picture of him after the Masters with the Hooters waitress, which just feels so Jimmy Garoppolo. Like it just, I love it. Nothing wrong with eating at Hooters, by the way. They have good wings there. It's supposed to be a family-friendly type of restaurant, but it is fitting considering some of Jimmy's earlier transgressions after that big contract.
Hey, it's a nice meal of wings is hard to pass up, so I can understand it.
Yes, it is. Wings are fantastic. Raphael5629ers, another sneakerhead here on the channel, coming in to say, what's up, Rob, and everyone. What's up, Raphael? Chris Royal coming in. What's up, Rob and Faithful? Chris, good to see you. Charles Thurman, another sneakerhead in here. Thoughts on the young man from Chattanooga? I think we'd be talking about Cole Strange there if we're talking about the young man from Chattanooga. I'm struggling with this one. So he's a draft crush for me. I really want the Niners to land him. And given where we are at 61 and 93, a lot of mocks have him falling in between those two. So it's tough. I think 61 is probably a little bit early to grab him, and 93 may be a little bit too late. So it could require trading around in the real draft in order to get that done.
And I think we're going to move around. I know when we did our mock draft on my channel the other night, we stuck to the script, but I don't see that to be the way it's actually going to play out. I see the 49ers moving up and down and just doing all kinds of different maneuverings to get to the guys that they really want, that they feel best fits their team.
I think so too. I think there's a strong chance they trade back from 61 a little bit. If a couple of players were to fall, I wouldn't be shocked if they traded up from 61 just a hair, although that gets really expensive to try and move up. And in the end, I just don't think they're going to try and select 9 players. I don't think that the 49ers would have 9 rookies drafted make the team. So you don't want to waste picks like that. You'd ideally take the correct number of players that can make the 53-man roster. So I think we're in alignment on that. Alan is coming in, another sneakerhead on the channel, to say, hey, Rob, Schuh, Jack Hammer, happy Friday. Love your show, guys. Hello to the chat. Love it. Love the energy. All right, let us get into the first topic that we have here. It's the one that we just can't stop talking about at the moment. It is more on the Deebo drama. So let me play this one out for you, Jack, and get your opinion. Tim Kawakami wrote a pretty phenomenal article, I thought, walking through the logic of why, if the 49ers believe they're going to be unable to broach the divide that currently exists, if the 49ers are skeptical that they'll be able to get a deal in place that both they and Deebo Samuel and his camp can agree to, that it would be logical they would pursue a trade of Deebo Samuel prior to this year's draft, because you would want to get a first-round pick in this year's draft to attempt to replace that production at wide receiver, or at least replace some of the value in this year's draft. Jack, does that seem like a large logical argument to you? And are you on board with this idea that if they believe it's doubtful they get the deal done, that the trade would happen sooner rather than later?
Yeah, it makes total sense that if that's the direction that they want to go, that they do feel like, well, not necessarily the direction they want to go, but the direction they feel like they need to go because they're not going to be able to get a deal done with Samuel. That, yeah, you make that move prior to the draft so that you can then get some picks that you can use this year to bolster your roster and kind of try to fill in what you would have had with Deebo Samuel. So it makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. Do you think they would be gun shy at all about truly doing that sort of, hey, we trade Deebo, in the package we get back among the other picks is a first rounder this year, and oh, hey, we're going to use that on a wide receiver? Would they be gun shy by being burned with the Javon Kinlaw pick, right? When you get a pick in return for a player that is wildly popular, such as DeForest Buckner, and then turn around and select someone at that position, people can't help but compare and contrast the two for the rest of their careers. And that's what's happening with Javon Kinlaw and DeForest Buckner. It obviously has not worked out in the 49ers' favor thus far. Do you think they would be gun shy about doing that again? If they got a first for Deebo, do you believe they would try and use it on a wide receiver?
I don't think they'd be gun shy. I think they trust in themselves and what they do. If they decide that they want to move on from Deebo Samuel, though, I think I'd probably be pretty hard on them, because I think it'd be a huge mistake for the 49ers. They might still be able to win some games, but I think they take themselves out of Super Bowl contention with a move like that.
Oh, wow. So you see that as a major step down for the offense, not something where Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Jawan Jennings and whomever they could add as another viable starting wide receiver. You don't think that they could create the same fire as a Niners team with Deebo on it?
No, I don't think so, because Deebo Samuel just does so many different things. I think part of the problem that people are having right now when they look at Deebo Samuel is they haven't really seen his full. They haven't been able to see everything that he can do, because he's been limited by the quarterback, the inability of the quarterback to get the ball to him deep on a consistent basis. And I think that with Trey Lance taking over in 2022, it's a time where you're going to see Deebo Samuel really start to ascend. We saw him ascend last year, but that's with a quarterback who was pretty much hitting him around the line of scrimmage, within 20 yards all the time. Once he gets to have Trey Lance there, I think you're going to see his numbers grow quite a bit. Grant had talked about earlier in the week, the percentage of deep balls of Trey Lance compared to Jimmy Garoppolo. He had 33 passes, 3 of his 71 passes go for over 40 yards. Which is a big number compared to what Jimmy Garoppolo, I think he had 8 and 400 and something, whatever. And Deebo Samuel got 2 of them. And they were both deep balls that he took for touchdowns. And again, I think you really need to look at what Deebo is able to do. And we saw him last year take a few deep throws, 2 from Lance. He had the one from Jimmy Garoppolo, a couple of them from Jimmy Garoppolo as well. This is a guy who can we haven't even seen him hit his stride yet. He's been handicapped a little bit, I think.
That excites me when I hear you talking about Deebo, because you would think after a season like he just had, well, you have hit the ceiling, right? That's what some of the logic is out there, that you can't pay him after that season because it was an anomaly. It's his best season. He's not going to be able to replicate it. But what I'm hearing you say is just wait until you see him paired up with someone like Lance with his skill set.
Absolutely, it's part of the reason why I know people don't like my take on this, but it's why I say I think he's better than Terrell Owens. Why I think he's the second best receiver I've ever seen play for the 49ers. And it's because of his ability. He has that ability to do the deep ball, and he has the ability to do that kind of stuff. And, Terrell Owens and Jerry Rice, they had quarterbacks, even if it wasn't Joe Montana and Steve Young, their backup quarterbacks were able to get the ball down the field as well. The 49ers haven't had that. They didn't have it with Nick Mullins. They didn't have it, maybe a little bit with CJ Beathard, but Deebo really never played with him because he didn't play in 19, and in 20 he only played the one game when Deebo wasn't playing. So
right,
I think that Deebo Samuel with a quarterback get the ball down the field, he's going to open some eyes.
This is an interesting thought here from Joey Nichols coming in. There's a price at which I would trade Deebo. It's just a really high price. And the thought that spawns for me, the question that I have for you, Jack, is let's say that you're in charge. You are, the buck stops with you at the San Francisco 49ers. You think the negotiations are ongoing and that they will eventually meet in the middle. We're not at a case where you believe the negotiations at a standstill and you feel compelled to trade Deebo before the draft. But you're picking up the phone as a responsible GM does. And the call comes in. If you get yourself a pretty phenomenal trade offer, are you going to listen to that? Or is Deebo basically on the untouchable list for you?
I would listen. I think he's on the untouchable list for me. I mean, I'd listen. They'd have to really blow me away. I mean, I'm talking about a draft. I would say, if you're going to give me, if you're the New York Jets and you call me up and you want Deebo Samuel, you're giving me 2 first-round draft picks this year and a first-round draft pick next year, because you have 2 right now you can give me for this year. I think that's the kind of thing that it would be. You'd have to blow me away in order for me to do that, because otherwise, I think he's too valuable. The 49ers don't have anybody else on their roster that can do the things that Deebo Samuel does. I've kind of seen enough of the people who have been saying it's Kyle Shanahan and it's his ability to scheme him open is
right.
I mean, come on, how hard, was it a scheme when he threw a tunnel screen and Deebo Samuel took it 80 yards from yards behind the line of scrimmage? Was it a tunnel screen when Deebo Samuel caught the ball behind the line of scrimmage and went 40 plus for a touchdown against the Rams in the NFC Championship game? I mean, there's a part of it that is, but that's the same with every coach in the NFL, really, quite frankly.
I mean, yes, that scheme does matter. And I do think that Deebo benefits from being with San Francisco, but I would tend to agree that San Francisco benefits more from having Deebo Samuel on the roster in that regard. Dirk Pippen is in alignment with you. Deebo has another gear. BK from the Bay is still doubtful, and it's fair with how contentious these talks have been. I don't see the team and Deebo seeing eye to eye on a contract. This is the point of the topic we're in right now, BK from the Bay, is that if the 49ers truly felt that way themselves as they approach the draft, would they consider trading Deebo if they believe that a deal isn't likely to get done? And Jack and I find that logic to be compelling. If they are truly convicted in the fact that the two sides are too far apart in order to come together, it would be logical, maybe not a smart move, but it would be logical to then pursue a trade so that you got something back this year from that release of the asset, right?
Yeah. If he's here after the draft, they're going to get something done. I think that's what it would tell me.
That was my next question there. If he's not traded, you see that as a signal that a deal is going to get done. Does that shift the balance? If Deebo's not traded, does it now mean for his negotiating team, oh, we can push a little bit harder, right? The team just basically blinked. The team just insinuated that Deebo is going to be here, and therefore we're closer than we believe. If we're at 28 and they're at 22, we can hold pretty firm to 28, and they'll start coming up.
It's interesting. It's one of those things where I don't know if it necessarily does. I mean, he's under contract for this year, so Deebo's either going to not get any money this year,
right,
or he's gonna get a new deal with the 49ers and get more money than he's supposed to get, right? So the 49ers have the control to an extent at this point.
Yeah, they have the contractual leverage at this point.
Correct. They're holding his money. Is really what the case is. I mean,
Right.
either you show up and play and you get paid, or you don't show up and you don't get paid.
Yeah, that would be ugly. You have to assume if it gets to that point, if it gets to holdout point, if it gets to the point where Deebo doesn't play, then you've melted down the entire relationship, and hopefully San Francisco is smart enough not to allow it to get there. All right, we may not be done with the Deebo talk, but I got to bring this in. All right, Jack, you got something there?
No, I wanted to point to the comment over here from Ecam. He makes a comment that cutting Jimmy has no basis on a new Deebo deal. I disagree with that. And the reason that I disagree with it is you can't fit a new deal for Deebo Samuel. It's going to be really tough, I should say, for you to fit a new deal for Deebo Samuel under the salary cap, and right now with Jimmy Garoppolo there. And the reason is because let's say he just gets $25 million guaranteed.
Right.
Okay, let's just say he gets the $25 million guaranteed, like what the receiver out in Vegas did, Devontae Adams, right? It was like around 25, 22 million. Let's say that's just his signing bonus or whatever. That's $5 million. That's already more than Deebo's going to get.
Right.
So early on, I would have agreed with it, but when you start to see the numbers that we're talking about for wide receivers, if they're going to pay him, I expect to see him probably get 20 plus million on a signing bonus, and I would expect to see him get, at this point right now, you're looking at probably about 60 to 70 million guaranteed. But the 60, 70 million guaranteed, remember, that doesn't mean that his contract's going to be a super high point this year. It would be down the road.
Right. Still. You can put a huge chunk into an initial signing bonus that then is prorated over the life of the contract. You can add voidable years at the end of the contract so that it's prorated over a longer portion. But I see what you're saying here, which is that we're talking about such a large sum of money that keeping his cap figure at or below where it is now seems pretty untenable, right? That seems like a challenge that even Parag is not going to be able to pull off. And there are a couple of contracts that remain that the 49ers could tweak and extend, right? I mean, they could mess around and extend Jimmy Ward. They have a couple of options, but not many. And if Deebo's cap number does go up, they also still have to pay a draft class, right? So at some point, of the necessary moves remaining, extending Deebo, signing your draft class, it does get tight if Jimmy's still on the roster.
Yeah, they're going to have to move. They're either going. I don't see how they're not going to move Jimmy Garoppolo and have the money, and because maybe they're working on a deal with Jimmy Ward and it's just really quiet. We're not hearing about it, but I haven't heard anything about Jimmy Ward extension. I haven't heard anything about an extension for the Emmanuel Mosley either. Those are two of the kind of remaining guys really that would make sense. Samson Ebicom is sitting out there right now, and the 49ers, we're going to get to that topic in a few minutes. And, there's some potential savings there, but they really need to move off of Jimmy Garoppolo before they get to July in order to make some of these moves start to happen.
Yeah, I'm hoping my team over yours is correct here with this one. I got a feeling Jimmy will be traded during the draft. I hope you're correct. All right, Thomas Luttrell coming in with the way I feel about it. Man, you got to pay Deebo. I have seen too many Rashawn Woods, AJ Jenkins, Smelters, Pettis, Hurds, etc. to want to lose Deebo. Yeah, you have, generational potential talent, right? It's not proven yet. I get the skepticism. I get people wanting to see a little bit more, but that's not where we are. We have the sample size we're going to get, and we got to make a decision. So the question becomes, with what you've seen so far, are you willing to say, we could live without that? Or do you say to yourself, no, this is far too valuable to our offense? And I'm siding with you, Jack. What I've seen so far from Deebo leaves me wanting more on my team. I don't want to watch him keep going on another team and take that next level.
Yeah, he's such an ascending player. It's really wild to me when I see the stuff that's being said about this guy on Twitter. It's just really wild to me because I think he's fantastic.
It upsets me a little bit. Terry's comment, I think, leads into it, and what you're saying leads into it. Terry Wright saying, why do we as fans think it's our money? The team is better with Deebo. We have a quarterback on a rookie contract. Pay the man. What I get tired of is seeing people taking shots at a guy who's just trying to negotiate a contract. I get that there's frustration in feeling it's an immature way to go about business, messing with social media, but I think people just have to realize that social media has become a tool, and athletes are using their negotiating levers to try and maximize their dollars. But what I cannot stand for, and if anyone is watching here that has ever done this on Twitter or in real life, by the way, Twitter is real life, even though it's a virtual world. If you have ever reached out to the athlete and insulted him, or heaven forbid, a death threat or anything racist, like when I hear Deebo say things like that, it tears my heart. Like, that just is a sad state of affairs for me, that fans get so worked up. I understand the emotion. I understand being committed to the team, but get so worked up to where they cross that line. It hurt me when it happened to Mostert, and it was painful to hear Deebo talking about it now.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between maybe sending a little tweak at somebody on Twitter compared to the death threats or the racial stuff. I had
important differentiation there. Very important differentiation.
Because I was tweeting some stuff out yesterday about Deebo Samuel and what have you, also Nick Bosa, and I mean, I had a couple of them that came through that were, one of them really was racist, and I was ready to retweet it, but I was like, I'm not going to retweet it because I don't want to give this guy the platform,
right?
And I don't want to have that on my my whatever you call it, stream or whatever it's called,
Yeah, I don't even want to bring that negativity into the feed.
Yeah, into the feed. Thank you, because it's garbage, and if you're doing that, you need to really rethink what you're doing.
Yeah, totally agree. Starco fan 212. This is, to me, I mean, if you get the asset, this is what you're attempting to do. If the 49ers, as we were talking about in this topic, decide that they're too far apart with Deebo, the logical move is then to try and move him before the draft. And if that happens, which would be a mistake in my book, but one, if both sides believe they can't come together, maybe a necessary mistake, then I would pursue Christian Watson as well. If you got yourself a draft pick for Deebo, are there any wide receivers that jump off the page at you that you would pursue in attempting to fill back some of that production?
Well, I mean, Watson is one that's kind of shown the ability to do multiple things at North Dakota State, right? I think for the Bison last year, he lined up at receiver, he lined up in the backfield, he returned kicks, he was doing all these different things. So it's kind of a Deebo-esque type of a player. But I just am hard pressed to say that there's any way they can. Deebo to me is like Deion Sanders back in the day, right? I mean, Deion Sanders was just amazing what he did, and his ability to play corner at that high level, to return kicks at the high level that he did, and then also to later on in his career move over and start playing wide receiver during his time he did a little bit with the 49ers in '94, but then to do it on a more consistent basis with the Cowboys afterwards. I was watching a highlight video of him today, and holy moly, I mean,
Deion.
I remember Deion was a stud, but it's been a while since I'd seen it, so it was good to see.
I got to go back and watch the highlights. You're getting me fired up. I've let go of my disdain for Deion. After he left us in '95, I was angry, Jack. I was angry. I was a teenager, right? All teenagers are angry. And I felt betrayed, and it took me a long time to forgive him. I don't know that I ever completely forgave him, but I have moved past it to the point where I respect the hell out of him. I love watching him. He's a phenomenal announcer, right? And it turns out he's a fairly good coach as well. So I wish him nothing but the best there. But now you got me fired up. I got to go back and watch some highlights. I want to bring in this point from Michael Duran, just not to comment on, but I think it's a valid one and it deserves to be said. I talked about potentially fans reaching out to him, and that's an assumption on my part. Michael Duran correctly pointing out, who's to say that it's fans? Racists can use any excuse to say racist stuff to someone because they're internet trolls. That's absolutely true. It may not be 49ers fans. That was the way in which Deebo sort of described it. But I think that was an assumption on his part as well, that these are probably the same people that were cheering for me during the year. And now that I'm trying to get my financial security are turning their backs on me, so to speak.
Oh yeah. Shoot, just read Twitter on a daily basis and take the racist part of it out. Just look at the number of people who are saying and the things that there are reasons for saying that he's not worth getting the top dollar. And I find it, here's my thing. I find the disconnect between, or the differences between the way people are approaching Deebo Samuel and the way that the people are approaching Nick Bosa to be fascinating, because both these guys have so far in their first 3 years played at the top of their game, played around the same level as other guys who are at the top of their game that are getting paid at the top of their game. And they both have similar concerns. You're the injury concerns for both of them. And beyond that, I just don't understand why some folks are saying it's okay. Let's give Nick Bosa 85 to 90 million guaranteed.
Right.
And at the same time, you're saying Deebo Samuel isn't even worth 50 million guaranteed. It's wild.
It is wild. What are your thoughts? Starco Fan 212, sneakerhead here on the channel, says, at Rob Schuh, do you think how teams are overpaying wide receivers has made it harder on the Niners? My take on this is that this is a free market. The free market, there is really no such thing as an overpay when you look at these trends, because the market is determining what their value is, right? As soon as a team decides to pay a wide receiver X amount of their salary cap, they've now set a new value. And then that's how the system works in its entirety. I am surprised by the level of those contracts. But as I look at the trends within the NFL of it being a passing league first and foremost, and these wide receivers coming out of college and being instantaneously productive, which is just wild to me, I guess it's not entirely shocking that this wide receiver market is going where it's been.
Yeah, no, it's. I don't even think teams are overpaying for wide receivers, because the whole marketplace is shifting, right? The quarterbacks have gone from, I think, 2 to 7 who are making more than $40 million a year. The defensive end market got totally reset a couple of years ago when TJ Watt got, almost $30 million. He got $80 million fully guaranteed. So that totally rechanged that market. So
right,
you're just seeing the market change because there's more money coming into it with the new TV deal. Everybody knows that this thing's going crazy in 2024. So the players are like, hey, if you're going to sign me to a contract that's taking me to that time, you need to pay me that money.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we talk about, hey, this cap is going to explode. And so it is off in the distance. But the reality is the players and their agents are well aware of that fact. And they are pricing in that explosion into these contracts that are getting done this offseason. It can only go up from here, you would think, right? Next offseason, it'll probably explode in a different position. Sure.
And does it hurt the 49ers? No, not if they do it right, because they have a quarterback who's going to be, I made this comment earlier in the week. Right now in Green Bay, their quarterback's going to hit $28 million against the cap this year. In Kansas City, their quarterback's going to hit $35 million against the cap this year. That's a big reason why those receivers were traded from those two teams. The 49ers, their starting quarterback's going to get $28 million over the next 3 years. That's not even including him getting a fifth-year option possibly down the road, or an extension that keeps them at a low cost point for the first year or two. So the 49ers are in a perfect spot to make some big deals with guys like Samuel and Nick Bosa happen.
Yes, and I do think that they have to take advantage of that. They are in that prime spot right now, 49ers. So get busy winning. Andrew Hoax correctly calling out. No, wait, that was the different one that I was. Oh, Matthew Mears calling out. Deebo obviously took it to heart. I was in response to Andrew's comment, though, talking about he asked who got the death threats and the racist stuff. It was Deebo Samuel that came on his, I don't think it was Instagram because I was watching that, but it was one of his social media accounts, and he talked about some fans reaching out to him. I agree with what Matthew's saying here. It did appear, even though he said it didn't bother him, when you take the time to respond to it, I think you're showing that it did, in fact, impact you. And I don't blame him. As a human being, that would impact me as well. That's why I wanted to come on, take a moment to condemn it. Not that I believe that anyone who watches this show would ever do something like that. I just think this is too positive of a space for those types of individuals. But we all may know someone who thinks it's okay to do that type of stuff in a, I don't know, halfway joking fashion and just doesn't realize the human impact. So thought it was worth calling out.
Yep, I'm with you. 100%.
Let's transition away from the Deebo drama. There are other things happening for the San Francisco 49ers, and one of those things was do you know the pronunciation here, Jack? Is it Kamoko Turay? What have you heard so far?
That first one sounds right. I think Kamoko Turay, I think is how you would
That's
say that.
what that feels phonetic. It rolls off the tongue. I got to go and listen to some highlights and see what the announcers, although judging what announcers have called some of the 49ers, I know that they don't always get those pronunciations right themselves. Do you see this as just something that happened, no big deal, or is this a low-key big signing for the San Francisco 49ers? Should we be paying attention to this?
I think you should pay attention to it. I think this is a signing that could really pay some big dividends for the team. Turay had 5.5 sacks last year. He only played 220 something snaps. Those are some pretty good numbers. That's a pretty good percentage. In 20, I think he started in 2018. So in 2018 and 2021, those are the only 2 seasons that he's been healthy, where he's played the majority of the games. He's had 9.5 sacks combined, or 10 sacks, I think it was. One of those two, 9.5 or 10. Combined sacks in those 2 years. It's going to be really interesting to see how this signing, what the impact is on the 49ers roster, especially on the defensive line and possibly even overall.
Yeah. Do you see this with that injury history that he comes in, and we'll get to the effects on the roster in just a moment, but with that injury history, do you have a concern there, or is this just a high risk but high reward type of signing, or low risk, high reward because it is a short-term deal?
The short-term deal, and we'll see when the 49ers announce it. If the 49ers announce it like over the weekend or whatever, that tells you that it's a vet minimum deal, right? Because it's got to be able to still fit it. They don't have much room in the salary cap, so it's got to be something that's going to fit right in that $1.2 million deal or whatever. And if that's the case, and this is a really good signing for the 49ers, and it's going to be interesting. Like I said, the 49ers have 11 guys right now. They have 14 defensive linemen on the roster, and they have 11 that you can look at and say these are pro NFL caliber defensive linemen.
Right.
And they typically only keep 10.
And you would guess they select at least one in the draft, right? 9 picks. If they make 7 of those, you would think one of them is going to be along the D line.
Yeah, I had 2 in our mock draft
right.
Night. So yeah, this one caught me off the guard a little bit. I knew that they brought him in, but this one really speaks more to me. This one speaks to either maybe keeping an extra defensive lineman this year, or moving on from Samson Ebukam.
That's what I was going to ask. So you talked about needing some of that cap flexibility. Samson Ebukam is an ascending player with the 49ers, but certainly I don't think had the production that they may have been hoping for from him right away. I thought second half of the season versus first half of the season was a bit of a night and day difference in his comfort, in how he looked out there. What was your interpretation of his projection over last season? And do you think he did enough towards the end of the year to save his spot? Or is the money more valuable than the player?
I really liked the way that he came on. He's never been just a defensive end in his career. He'd always been a linebacker defensive end, going back and forth between the two. Never really been able to hone, on his pass rush skills. I think he was able to do that this year. We saw him improve as the season went along, like you said. And I really like Samson Ebukam, but they're in this weird position with their salary cap, and you can save $6.5 million by moving off of them. So I could definitely see that be a move that they make without really having to really get too far down the road with saying that they made a bad move.
Is it fair to say that at $6.5 million, Samson would need to play at or above the level he played in the second half of the season last year to really warrant that type of money? I mean, $6.5 million on a single year deal for an edge rusher is a fairly productive edge rusher.
Yeah, I mean it's a good quality signing at $6.5 million though too, right? But I think that's a tough one. His cap hit's over $8 million actually this year, and if he can play at that same level that he played over the last 8 weeks, I would say if he could do that throughout the entire season, you're looking at probably a guy who gets somewhere around 8 sacks this season, which would be okay.
Man, I hope the Niners go with 11 players or somehow work out a way to keep Samson on the team. I see it as an upward trend for his progression. Bebop Jones is just trusting anybody that gets coached up by Chris Kocurek, because he is going to develop that player. In Kocurek, we trust. I have to agree with that wholeheartedly. And Jamie Bryant in strong agreement around the signing itself. Kamoko Turay is a big deal. Nice sign for us. I agree, Jamie. I think this one flies a little bit under the radar because of when it occurred in free agency. Most of the time, you don't think of these deals that happen later on with these vets that have been out there throughout free agency. You think, oh, well, everybody's kicked the tires on them. It must be a low-key signing. But some of these are the players that make the difference in that next season. And this one strikes me as it has the potential for that. High upside is how I see it.
Yeah, it's like in the draft, right? Everybody talks about how the draft, everybody focuses on the first round, but your championship teams are really developed on day 3 of the draft, right? Rounds 4 through 7. It's kind of the same thing with your free agency period. A lot of people focus really hard on those first few signings, but when you start to really take a step back, a lot of the guys that are taken a couple of weeks into it and beyond are the ones that make the big differences. Shoot, I know everybody talks about the Rams going all in, but all those guys that helped them get to the Super Bowl last year, with the exception of Stafford, were guys that were brought in after the season had started.
Right. And look back at the 2011 signings for the San Francisco 49ers. A lot of those free agents that came in and turned the tide for that team were later additions in free agency, right? I mean, I think we got a bunch of those names that came in after the initial trickle. A lot of value from Trent Baalke in that offseason.
Yeah, it was. Well, they also had the lockout that year, but yeah, there was definitely a good number of folks that came in that they were able to bring in late, right before training camp or as it started, that really played out big. And like Gav says over here in the comment section, in Rob Schuh we trust, and I agree. I think that's a good one.
Yes, it is. Jamie, it's good to see you here, man. I hope that you are doing well. I see your other comment there, man. I hope that you continue to take it day by day. It's good to see you back in here. And yes, the notorious GAV. Hey, who am I to fault with in Rob Schuh we trust? It's how it should be. Trust the shoe. All right. Let's transition away from Kamoko Turay, who we both agree is a great signing for the San Francisco 49ers. I think you're right. If it gets announced this weekend, it probably is going to be one of those vet minimum deals. And so an even better signing if you look at the value of it, potential upside, nothing but good stuff. This one came out this morning. Hot take, the world according to Jack, which is a play on words. You got to figure it out for yourself, but I immediately knew it when he threw it out there. But the world according to Jack is a wonderful Twitter phenomenon that now occurs. Is it every day, Jack, or is it just weekdays?
Now, I've been doing it every day. I might have to take a day off here just to make sure I don't run out of material over 365 days. But
that's a lot. Those are a lot of little nuggets you got to get out there.
The plan is to keep doing it on a daily basis because I know I have fun with it. And I know people do too.
I absolutely love it to this point. And today's was another one that just, some of them are fun facts. Some of them are historical references, and some like this are just whether you want to call it a hot take, it's a spicy opinion is how I'm going to label it. So Jack, I want you to attempt to make the case for our listeners and our viewers here as to why you believe Talanoa Hufanga should be the starting safety when we roll into 2022.
Yeah, I think the 49ers really like Talanoa Hufanga. I think that's the first point that needs to be made. I think the team really likes what they have in this guy. They were successful with him last year. We're 2-1 in his 3 starts. The only time that they didn't win with him on the field as a starter was the Cardinal game when he had Tavon Wilson starting alongside him. So no Jimmy
Missing
Ward.
Jimmy Ward.
Yep. So Jimmy Ward's kind of the key there in terms of being able to carry that forward, I think, into 2022. Hufanga's a guy who, when you watch what he did last year, he definitely had some issues. Primarily, a lot of his issues came when he was playing too high safety. Had some guys run past him and things like that. He's not going to turn and run with guys quite as well as what Jimmy Ward or Jaquiski Tartt will do. But there's some things that he does fairly well. I think this is a guy, the 49ers, like I said, I think they really like him. And more importantly, we haven't heard anything on the front of a new contract for Jimmy Ward. So I have a feeling that there's Jimmy Ward's might be on his way out after this season with the 49ers. Again, the salary cap is going up and you can only have so many guys. And if that's the direction that you're taking it, you want to get Hufanga his reps so that next year when you have the guy that you draft this year to replace Jimmy Ward, you have a guy who can kind of be the leader on the back end of the defense. And I think that Hufanga definitely, if you look at if you watch him from last year and you're you're 100%, honest with it. He has some issues, but at the same time, he made some plays.
I like the take. And the thing I agree with most fervently is the 49ers' belief in Talanoa Hufanga, that they're fond of him. That seems to be very true to me in everything I've heard coming out of the organization. I just got to put up the notorious GAV. The 49ers, according to Jack, is by far my favorite thing to check on Twitter on a daily basis. I agree, Gav. That you need to have some good things on Twitter to balance out all the BS that ends up on that app. Maybe Elon Musk can fix that space, but I just don't know. That seems like too tall of a task, even for a guy who's planning to live on Mars for the rest of his freaking life.
Hey, there's nothing about Elon Musk that tells me he's going to make Twitter a better place.
No, I think you're right about that. Jamie Bryant saying, Rob Schuh, I appreciate you. Jamie, I appreciate you, my friend. I honestly hope that you're doing okay. Notorious GAV coming in. Hufanga is going to make a massive step in his second year. So do you believe this to be a reasonable course of action for the 49ers? You've made the case for why they believe that it may be. Is this a reasonable strategy? Is this the prudent choice going forward, or do they leave themselves slightly exposed at that position?
I think they've put some depth there, right? I mean, they got George Odom, who has been a starter at safety in his career.
Right.
They have Tarvarius Moore, who can compete for a spot there. And I've seen Moore's name thrown out. And Moore's coming off of a torn Achilles, and that's can be an issue when it comes to changing directions and things like that. We saw Michael Crabtree struggle a little bit with that when he came out of it.
Right. Especially like he was talked up for being an athletic individual, right? That was his skill set, and that's going to be taken away with the Achilles injury.
Yeah, and I got to be quite honest. There's nothing that I've seen in the game of when Tarvarius Moore has been on the field. There's nothing I've seen that makes me think that he's an upgrade over Talanoa Hufanga. I think they both have their issues. Hufanga, struggles a little bit with turning and running with folks, whereas you want and angles, and that's the same thing you have with Moore, with Tarvarius Moore. He struggles with angles, he struggles with tackling, and I think Hufanga at least brings you a little bit better tackler.
Yes, he certainly brings you phenomenal tackling, and the 49ers in the secondary seem to place value on that above many other traits. And it does make sense to me. If you are building a bend but don't break style of defense that is phenomenal at getting after the passer, you want to just keep them from getting the deep shots, the long scores. If you can tackle them inbounds and then get another set of downs where you can get after the quarterback, that's the end result. It seems to me that's the course of attack. The 49ers haven't focused on ball hawks. They have focused on guys that are sure tacklers. And to me, their plan is to force the turnovers from pressure. It is the defensive front that is going to apply that pressure to the opposing offenses.
Yeah, and the other piece around Hufanga, too, really quick, as we're talking about him, is that he's a guy who I think he plays really good in the box. When he's up around the line of scrimmage. With the addition of Tarvarius Ward, you're going to see that the 49ers, I think, play more man coverage or be able to play tighter coverage in the secondary, which is going to allow Hufanga maybe not to have to play that second single high safety role quite so much and have to play a half a field instead of playing a third. And believe me, it's easier to play a third than it is to play a half.
No doubt.
I just, I think that there's some other things that are at play that make Hufanga be able to play that role. He's not going to be an upgrade over. I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be an upgrade over Jaquiski Tart, but I think the 49ers can win games with him at safety.
Okay, we have opposing comments here, and I want to get your take on it, Jack. 49er Gang 916. Hufanga has a nose for the ball. More times than not, he's always in the vicinity. Tom Jensen, sneakerhead here on the channel, and someone that I just know to be a very insightful dude, as we have had a lot of communications, comes in at Rob and Jack. If Hufanga starts, these stats from last year don't change much. 26th in interceptions, 23rd turnover differential, 29th in average starting field position. In my opinion, they need ball skills and speed at safety. So those are two opposing viewpoints of it. Which one is closer to where you find yourself, Jack? Do you see Hufanga as being someone who's been in close proximity to the ball, and therefore you could expect that one of these years, if he has the opportunity, he may get to connect on some of those interceptions, force some of those turnovers? Or do you believe that if he is the starting safety, we're probably more in line with where we were last season?
I think that, if you go back and you watch what he did, there's a reason why I think he might have been the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year his senior year. I think he was. I mean, he had a number of turnovers and things like that as a senior. He was around the ball a lot. I think he has that ability. The one thing with Tom's comment, because I saw that when it came through, is I would like to know why he thinks that the 29th ever starting field position is still going to be a piece with him, unless he just feels like the teams are just going to drive the ball on the 49ers. Kind of what his thought is there. The turnover.
Because you would think if he starts at safety, he'll no longer be on the coverage unit, right? I mean, you would think that with the additions to special teams, you would think that they would plug those players in if you're going to have Talanoa starting at safety.
Right, you would expect that he's going to be starting. He wouldn't be on the coverage units in that group. But they've made some moves around that area, so that's where George Odom comes into play and stuff. But and I think that the thing with the turnover differential, I think if the 49ers secondary can play tighter, the pass rush is going to get home, and that's where you're going to see those turnovers come from.
I agree with that it's all about the pass rush. Chris Royal coming in with some faith at Rob Schuh. Talanoa works with Troy Polamalu, who similarly had issues working receivers early in his career. I believe Hufanga will make a big jump this season. Hey, if the plan is to start him, Chris, I hope you are right about that. All right, let's take this fun one and bring it in. Ron Lippman says, what happens first? Elon gets to Mars or the 49ers trade Jimmy Garoppolo? I'm voting with Mars on this one, just out of frustration, Jack. That's where I'm going with that one.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Actually, we were talking about something like that last night with Jesse on the Hammer and Hill show about there was one of the guys in the channel that he had been talking to who wants to just strap Jimmy into a rocket and shoot him to Mars.
I love it. We have Tom coming in to clarify, and this now makes sense. So because of a lack of turnover differential, they won't have the advantage of the starting field position of starting, inside the opponent's territory, wherever you get that turnover. So that does make sense to me, that would influence your average starting field position. It has nothing to do with special teams, as I was surmising. All right, so we've now hit that one, and I think you've made me moderately more comfortable with the 49ers not going safety. I still hold out this weird hope that they're going to get Jalen Petrie, that he's going to fall into the 50s, they're going to move up, and he gives them that sort of tweener role of a nickelback and a safety, and he's a ball hawk, and that's just, I'm crossing my fingers here, Jack, but I want a lot of things in the draft, and we don't have enough early picks to get it done. So that's probably not happening.
Yeah.
This one, though, is directly related to the draft in transitioning to this topic, which is, and a play on words, with the bandage here, Jack, but have the 49ers bandage their wounds on the roster as successfully as I have bandaged the wound on my face. It's much less noticeable today than yesterday when I went no bandage, or the day before where I had the frickin' map size bandaged on my face when I was on your channel.
Yeah, I think they have. I think the first they've done this consistently throughout the last few years, where they do a really good job of kind of filling all their basic needs through free agency. So when they get to the draft, it's, they don't have any one spot that they have to go. I mean, last year you knew they were going to take a quarterback, but that wasn't because of anything that was going on with the roster than the fact that they traded up as high. You knew at
right. It just sort of dictated that you don't trade that high unless it's for a quarterback.
Exactly. But the 49ers have done a pretty good job in the recent past of filling most of those roles, and I feel pretty good about it. I think, you can make an argument nickel needs to be taken a look at. You can make the argument is still in the safety. I kind of did, even though I said that Hufanga I think is going to start. I still think the safety is a need. They need to find another safety to take off for Jimmy Ward if he's not going to be back. I think their offensive line is going to be okay. Mike Mullins, if he based off of the way that he looked in his last video, I mean, I think he's going to be okay this year. So I think they've done a pretty good job of bandaging up their wounds.
So let's talk about them a little one by one, because I have some questions for you about those. So at safety, which I agree is still, they have bandaged it. It is covered. If they needed to go with who they have on the roster, I think it would be okay. I don't think it would be a tragedy. I think you could still have a top defense in the league with who they have at safety. But you see it as a possibility that Talanoa Hufanga could start, they may anticipate moving on from Jimmy Ward and therefore may still draft a safety. When you envision that scenario, do you see them drafting the safety in the middle rounds and not investing one of their earlier picks into that safety position?
It just depends on where they are at that point. Where the
Right.
if there's a safety that falls into that 60 range, can they get them without having to spend too much money to get up and get them? Because I know Brisker is a name that I keep seeing. Petrie is a name that I keep seeing.
I love this list right there from Joey.
Yeah, and I'm reading off of his, but the other one that's not on his list is Leon O'Neal Jr., and that's a guy who can come later in the draft
Right.
that I think would fit. From the description and the way he's described in his draft profile, he sounds like Jaworski Tart, the ability to play up, man coverage and play deep and all those different types of things. So it's kind of weird to me that he's fallen as far down the draft boards as he is. But if Leon O'Neal is the pick, I think that's a good one for the 49ers too.
Do you see it likely that the 49ers still draft an edge player even after adding Turay?
Depends on what their thoughts are on what they can do with what they have right now. Jordan Willis is he's not going to be back, so maybe you would still get a guy like the kid out of South Carolina, Ingabar. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name.
Yeah, I've been going with Enagbare, but it's just because it sounds sort of sophisticated.
Yeah, there you go. The sophisticated route, right? So the Enagbare, if you go with him, he's more of the bigger guy that would be kind of like your Jordan Willis type of a player, not your fast coming off the edge guy like you have with the two guys they have on their side right now, Ebicom and then I'm blanking on his name. We just talked about him a second ago. You know who I'm talking about. The guy that they just signed.
Yes, Turay.
Yeah, Turay.
Kamoko Turay, as I am pronouncing it. I think correctly. That's my gut.
Yeah.
So do you see the 49? Well, Michael Duran here talking about another potential pick there. Edge Nick Benito looking to be a great pick at 61. I believe he had the second or third most quarterback hurries coming out of the draft. I certainly like that pick. I still see it as a potential that the 49ers go edge. Would you assume if they did, that might spell the end for somebody currently on the roster? That if they go edge in the second, third, or maybe even fourth round, that it could be bumping someone off of San Francisco 53, potentially the cost-saving measure of cutting Samson Ebukam?
Yeah, I think if they go with another edge player in rounds 2 or 3, I think that means somebody's going to go. Whether it means it's Ebicom or maybe it could even be a Kerry Hyder. It could be, who knows? There's some guys who they've brought in who I think we're excited about, but maybe they're looking at saying, well, this guy is really good. I'm happy with that. We have him, but let's see if we can get somebody that can compete with him and maybe push him off the roster that we can have for a longer period of time. Because that Kerry Hyder is not part of the 49ers plans for 2023 and beyond.
Not at all. Not at all. A 1-year signing, and I'm sure he's hoping it warrants another bigger deal, as it did for him with Seattle last year. BK from the Bay. Hey, Rob, when did you become a UFC fighter? No, what happened was I disrespected Jack before the show, and he set me straight real quick. I'll never do that again. No, I did not get my bandage from fighting. Just a quick little surgery. I am on the mend. Do you see interior O-line? I know you mentioned it, but this one to me feels like maybe the most vulnerable. If we're talking about bandaging up gaping wounds, the O-line and viable starters at the guard position with some unknowns at McGlinchey. Can he start the season at right tackle? Some unknowns. Alex Mack, he's probably going to be back, but is he really going to be back? Is that the position group where you think it's closest to, hey, the Niners are almost certainly going to invest in interior O-line, and they're going to probably do it early on in this draft?
I don't know about early on. This is a group, this is a position, their interior offensive line, especially center. I think the center is the spot that you're focusing on for the 49ers with their interior offensive line. And that's a spot that you can get guys anywhere from the 3rd, the 4th, 5th round that fit well. You can get Fortner probably in the 3rd. You can get Jurgens probably in the 4th. You get Lidstrom probably in the 5th. So there's guys, just depending on where they want to go, that can fill what I believe is a need for kind of get a center for the future. There's a few guys that I think definitely fit that bill.
That's really what I want. A center for the future that can play guard right now. It seems to be just the perfect fit. And I would guess that the 49ers attack that by the end of the third round. That would be my prediction, is that by the end of the third, they have attempted to address that. But the other side of the argument is best player available. And Chris has a comment here at Rob, our team is pretty solid. I like to play at best player available this draft. That takes us into our final topic here. Do you believe that the 49ers truly will be in best player available? Or when you look back at this draft, will they have magically gotten an interior lineman, a safety, an edge rusher, a fast wide receiver, a nickel corner? Like, are they going to fill those needs? Or do you think they truly go best player available and we could see some surprises?
I think it's funny because you always have this best player available conversation, and it's not just best player available; it's best player available that fits a need for your team.
Right.
If you have three really good running backs, or whatever, and the best player available on the board is a running back, that doesn't mean you're going to go running back. If you're already pretty solid at that position, you might say that the best player available is a center. Even though there's a couple other guys that are ahead of him on your board, the best player that for a position we need right now is a center. That's who I'm going to get, because by the time we pick again, I'm not going to be able to get him.
I totally agree. I think you have to balance that. And I think Shanahan said as much when he talked about it at the owners' meeting. He said, hey, in an ideal world, you would reverse free agency and the draft. You would draft first so that you could truly do best player available. And then you would reassess your roster and say, oh, okay, I've got some holes left. I guess I'm going to have to go and overpay it. I mean, in that hypothetical, it's interesting because then you would really have to overpay because other teams would know that you had those holes remaining. There wouldn't be a draft for you to fill those holes, and those players' agents would know that you had those holes on your roster as well. So you really would have to overpay. But I do think that was an acknowledgement that yeah, like I look at our roster, I see some spots that are questionable, and we will probably look to address those spots while going best player available, to your point.
Yeah, I think that's the way that it'll work. And the 49ers do a really good job. Like we said earlier, they have I think they pretty much have their spots all filled.
Yeah.
But, if you look at that defensive line, they have some really good defensive linemen out there, right? But a lot of those guys aren't going to be around next year. So if there's a really good defensive lineman that's sitting out there that you want to take, you grab him, you put him on your team, and you let him compete. He's probably going to knock one of those guys that's at the bottom off.
Yes. And the team is getting better in doing so. Roger Sellers with a little bit of optimism, and that's a great way to close out the show. At Rob Schuh, speaking of O-line, McGlinchey looked like he was moving really well in that video. Gives me hope for the O-line. What was your takeaway in seeing Mike McGlinchey running on the sideline under a resistance band, but doing some actual running there and confirming that the weight was on point?
Yeah, I think that was a really good. That really, in a lot of ways, is something that I think people should take that as a little bit of take a little bit of a step back when it comes to your offensive line and the worries that you have about that group. McGlinchey, is he going to be ready for week one? We'll find out.
Right.
He's definitely looks like he's further along than we thought. I mean, what I liked more, the running was good, but I like the fact that we saw him doing some weights, explosive movements with weights.
Those were explosive movements.
Yeah, and I know the weight wasn't heavy when he was doing them, but that doesn't really matter. It's the ability to make those movements with a little bit of additional weight on your hands or shoulders, wherever it is. And I think that that bodes well for his availability going forward. And if he's ready to go week one, I think you're looking at an offensive line that could go. I think you're looking at that point, if he's good to go week one at right tackle. You're looking at a situation where Jalen Moore, maybe he's in a dogfight to try to get that second spot away from a Daniel Brunskill, or maybe it's Brunskill is going to slide into center because they know that Alex Mack's going to move on. Who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of things that can go, but that's why this offensive line's fun. I know people have been down on it, but I actually think this is an okay group.
You see it as a bunch of puzzle pieces that are versatile, and they're all good depth and could be plugged in to create one cohesive unit. And that gives you some feeling of surety going in that, hey, it may not all be settled right now, but the pieces are there to put something into place, even if we don't add to it beyond this.
Yeah. And even if you decide that you want to trade Mike McGlinchey, don't rule out that possibility either, right? That's a $10.8 million cap hit that's guaranteed you. If you're
Right.
unless you're going to build around him for years to come, maybe they move on from him and Jalen Moore becomes your right tackle. I
That's
mean, there's,
fair.
there's lots of things that this team can do. And I'm pretty, I've been kind of bullheaded on this whole thing, but I feel like that group is better than they've been talked about.
I agree, especially in the depth conversation. That to me is the key of it. Joey Nichols just coming in. God, I love the draft. Me too. It gives you like endless possibilities, all this excitement. Hope is on the horizon. New guys coming in the NFL. NFL dreams are being realized right in front of your eyes. There's something special about the NFL draft. No doubt about it in my book. There's some magic to that event, and we are getting close to it.
Yeah, you always get excited about it, right? I remember last year at the draft, I was going on a nightly basis and talking about what happened that day, and it was fun. I mean, you knew they were going to quarterback day one. It was fun to get on and talk about Trey Lance, even though even though for me it was Mac Jones, but for it to be Trey Lance, I was fine with that one too, right?
Right.
And then in day two, when they went with Trey Sermon, I was pretty excited about Trey Sermon. I still think Trey Sermon's going to be a good player for the 49ers. So I don't know. Even the Banks pick, right? Well, just think about it. Too. A year ago this time, everybody was fired up because it was going to be Mac Jones, or I mean, we were having it was a daily battle on Twitter.
Yeah. It was
the
heated.
Quarterback. Yes. And then after the draft, everybody was sure that these guys were going to come in and be starters. That Trey Lance was going to take over. He was going to be the starting quarterback. Trey Sermon was going to be the starting running back. Aaron Banks was for sure going to be the starting right guard.
Right. I remember my NFL fantasy drafts. Trey Sermon was bouncing off of that board early. Let me tell you.
Yeah. And what's funny is those top three guys that everybody was so excited about, they didn't really play a whole lot in 2020.
Did not. May still contribute now.
They will.
But they did not then. Yeah, it really does shape up differently. But it is all excitement when the draft unfolds. Everybody is either a huge miss or a home run, right? We've all got our opinions, and it's beautiful. They haven't even played a snap. Dirk Pippen coming in to say, great show. Jack's takes are always spot on. I couldn't agree more, and I wanted to take that comment as a chance to say that Jack's information is down below. I neglected to say it earlier. I'm a bad host for doing it, but it is down below. You can go follow Jack on Twitter, subscribe to Jack's channel on YouTube, and bookmark the Santa Rosa Press Democrat blog on your browser. I just went in there and read both of those articles that contributed to the content today. Good stuff, people. Make sure that you are following Jack, and we can close out on Chris Royal's super chat here. Yep. Ebucom played fairly well. Do you think we have a chance to trade him for later round picks or two? That would allow us to still draft an edge while getting younger and cheaper. This is creative. I mean, we talked about, well, the 49ers may want to free up that $6.5 million. And you responded, Jack, with yes, and that $6.5 million is a pretty good signing for him, right? Like the value is appropriate for a player of his skill, and edge is certainly a coveted position in the NFL. Do you think there's a chance the Niners could trade him to get some assets in return?
Sure. Maybe if there's a guy that they really like in round two, they can trade their second round pick and Samson Ebukam to move up a couple of spots instead of using later picks to do it. And there's all kinds of things, but definitely he could be a trade chip based off of where they've put themselves with their recent signings. Absolutely. That would be, I agree with you. I thought he played well too, but yes, he could be a trade chip for them to use to either get a pick or move up along with trading another pick to get there. And like you said, it gets cheaper, gets you younger. Both those things get accomplished with it.
I think that is a great way to get lost value back. Instead of cutting a player, when you're able to include them creatively in a trade package to either move around in the draft or to gain additional draft picks for this year or next, to me, that is the sign of a creative and knowledgeable front office where they're able to maximize each and every asset. And you see that in what they're hoping to do with Jimmy Garoppolo. Yes, it is endlessly frustrating that Jimmy is still on the team, and they are doing their due diligence to attempt to recoup some asset in return for letting go of a valuable asset, which is a starting caliber quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, even if he is one that frustrates the fan base to no end.
Yeah, I can understand the frustration. I want to see him get traded too, or whatever. The 49ers need to move on. I'm fine with him. It would be fun to cover a training camp with him and Trey Lance again. But I think with where the 49ers are right now, I finally gotten to the point where I see the light with the need to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo, and I've accepted it.
Me too, Jack. Well, this has been a phenomenal show. If you're still here, hit that like button on the way out. Everybody loved it. Raphael 562 great show, gentlemen. Brian Culp, great show, guys. Joey, yeah, another good show, fellas. I thought it was phenomenal. Really enjoyed these topics. Really enjoyed the conversation, as I always do with you, Jack. I hope that you have yourself a fantastic weekend. Are you going to be back at it on Monday?
I will be back on Monday. Getting going on Monday like always. So definitely tune in for that one. It should be fun.
Beautiful. This was a phenomenal show. Jax, thank you for being here. Enjoy your weekend. Everyone out there, enjoy your weekend. You can follow me on Twitter to look and see if I get that call-in show finally going. We shall see. It'll probably depend on whether I can get my bandage to stay on that day or not. Otherwise, I'll be back on Monday getting the stitches out Monday afternoon. So hopefully things will be good at that point. We shall see.
Hopefully it all goes smooth for you.
Yes, I trust that it will. But until then, you guys know the drill. Cheers, Niner faithful.